The rain had been falling over Fort Raven for nearly 3 hours. Captain Daniel Hayes stood beneath the stone archway of the military headquarters, his dark coat soaked at the shoulders. Around him, officers hurried through the compound, their boots striking the wet pavement in sharp, disciplined rhythms. But Daniel barely noticed the rain. His eyes were fixed on one person. Colonel Victoria Hayes. His wife. She stood beneath the entrance canopy wearing her perfectly pressed dark green officer's uniform. Her medals reflected the pale afternoon light, and her expression was as cold and controlled as ever. Beside her stood Major Ethan Cross, her deputy. Daniel had known Ethan for almost 4 years. He had never trusted him. Not because Ethan was incompetent. Because Ethan was too interested in Victoria. And Victoria seemed to enjoy his attention. Daniel approached them slowly. Victoria. She glanced at him. For half a second, something softened in her eyes. Then it disappeared. Daniel. What are you doing here? He smiled faintly. You asked me to come. Victoria frowned. I did? Last night. You said we needed to discuss the ceremony. Ethan chuckled. Ceremony? Daniel looked at him. Yes. Ethan leaned against one of the pillars. You mean the medal ceremony? Daniel nodded. That one. Ethan smiled. You're attending? Daniel's expression tightened. Why wouldn't I? Because it's an officer's ceremony. Victoria immediately interrupted. Ethan. But she didn't sound angry. She sounded amused. Daniel noticed. Ethan looked Daniel up and down. Sorry. I just assumed civilians weren't allowed inside. Daniel's jaw tightened. I'm not a civilian. Ethan laughed. Really? Daniel stared at him. I served. Served? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Where? Daniel didn't answer. Victoria stepped forward. Daniel, don't. Those 2 words hurt more than Ethan's insult. Don't. Don't defend yourself. Don't embarrass me. Daniel returned to the apartment just before midnight. Victoria didn't come home. He expected that. He poured himself a glass of water and sat beside the window. For nearly 10 minutes, he simply watched the city lights. Then he opened the metal case. Inside was a black folder. Across the front were 3 words. Operation Iron Shield. Daniel slowly opened it. Photographs. Mission reports. Satellite images. Names. Dates. And finally, his own photograph. Captain Daniel Hayes. Decorations. Silver Star. Distinguished Service Cross. Medal of Valor. 3 classified commendations. Daniel stared at the medals. Nobody knew about them. Not even Victoria. That had been deliberate. 6 years earlier, Daniel had led a covert rescue mission behind enemy lines. The mission had saved 47 soldiers. But the operation had been classified. His name had been removed from the public record. Officially, he had been listed as support personnel. Unofficially, he had been the soldier who walked into hell and brought everyone home. After the mission, Daniel had been offered a senior command position. He refused. Because Victoria had just received her first major promotion. She had told him, Daniel, I need you to support me. So he did. He left the military. He became the quiet husband. The man behind the successful officer. The man nobody saluted. The man nobody remembered. And Victoria had slowly forgotten what he had sacrificed. The next morning, Daniel received a phone call. Captain Hayes? Daniel froze. Nobody had called him that in years. Yes? This is General Marcus Reed. Daniel stood. General. We need you at the ceremony. Daniel's expression changed. I thought my participation was classified. It was. And now? A pause. Your classification has been lifted. Daniel looked toward the window. Why? Because you're finally receiving what was owed to you. Daniel closed his eyes. How soon? 3 days. At headquarters, Ethan Cross was enjoying himself. Victoria sat across from him inside her office. You handled Daniel well yesterday, Ethan said. Victoria looked uncomfortable. He was humiliated. He humiliated himself. Victoria looked down. He's my husband. Ethan leaned forward. Exactly. Your husband. He smiled. And that's why people laugh behind your back. Victoria's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Everyone knows you married beneath your level. She didn't answer. Ethan continued. You became Colonel Victoria Hayes. He became nothing. Victoria slowly looked away. Those words had already lived inside her mind for years. Maybe that's why they hurt. Maybe that's why she never defended Daniel. Ethan stood. You need someone beside you who understands power. Victoria looked at him. And you think that's you? I know it is. Before Victoria could respond, the office door opened. General Marcus Reed walked in. Colonel Hayes. Victoria stood immediately. General. Reed placed a folder on her desk. Tomorrow morning, you're to report to the Central Command. Victoria opened it. Why? Personnel review. Is something wrong? The general stared at her. You'll find out. Then he left. Victoria looked at Ethan. That's strange. Ethan shrugged. Probably routine. But it wasn't. Across the city, Daniel was preparing for something neither of them expected. He stood before a mirror wearing his old uniform. The uniform still fit. His medals were pinned carefully across his chest. He looked at himself. Not as Victoria's husband. Not as a nobody. But as Captain Daniel Hayes. The soldier he had buried 6 years ago. His phone rang. Captain Hayes, General Reed said. Yes, sir. Tomorrow, you will arrive through the eastern gate. Understood. And one more thing. Yes? Do not tell your wife. Daniel smiled. I wasn't planning to. The following morning, Victoria arrived at Central Command. She expected a routine meeting. Instead, she walked into a conference room filled with senior officers. General Reed sat at the head of the table. Beside him were 2 generals and a civilian defense official. Victoria stopped. What's going on? General Reed motioned toward the chair. Sit down. Victoria did. Reed opened a file. Colonel Victoria Hayes, your record has been reviewed. She swallowed. Is there a problem? Yes. Her heart sank. Reed continued. You've demonstrated excellent tactical performance. Victoria exhaled. But your leadership evaluations show repeated concerns regarding personal favoritism. Victoria stiffened. What favoritism? Reed looked directly at her. Major Ethan Cross. Her face went pale. That's not true. We have witness statements. Victoria couldn't speak. Then Reed opened another file. This concerns your husband. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. Victoria stared. What does Daniel have to do with this? Reed didn't answer. Instead, the door opened. Everyone stood. Daniel walked inside. Victoria's mouth fell open. He was wearing his full ceremonial uniform. His chest was covered in medals. Not the small decorations she had seen at home. These were military honors. Rare ones. Victoria stared at him. Daniel? He stopped beside General Reed. Colonel. She couldn't understand. What are you wearing? Daniel looked at her calmly. My uniform. Ethan suddenly entered behind her. He froze. His eyes moved across Daniel's medals. Then his face changed. No. Daniel looked at him. Yes. General Reed stood. Ladies and gentlemen, 6 years ago, Captain Daniel Hayes led Operation Iron Shield. Victoria's face went white. Reed continued. He rescued 47 soldiers behind enemy lines. Ethan whispered. That mission was classified. Correct. Reed looked at Daniel. Captain Hayes was officially Remo. General Reed activated the presentation. The screen displayed 47 photographs. 47 soldiers. Victoria stared at them. These men were trapped behind enemy lines, Reed said. Daniel remained silent. Their unit was surrounded. The screen changed. Satellite imagery appeared. Captain Hayes volunteered to enter the area. Victoria whispered. Alone? Reed nodded. Alone. Daniel looked at the floor. He remembered every second. The darkness. The gunfire. The freezing rain. The screams over the radio. He remembered finding the soldiers. He remembered carrying wounded men. He remembered staying behind when everyone else escaped. He remembered the explosion. And he remembered waking up 3 days later. Victoria covered her mouth. Why didn't you tell me? Daniel looked at her. Because you were building your career. She shook her head. I would have supported you. Daniel gave her a sad smile. Would you? Victoria couldn't answer. Reed continued. Captain Hayes refused promotion after the mission. Victoria stared at him. Why? Reed looked at her. Because his wife was beginning her own command career. Daniel finally spoke. I thought love meant standing behind someone. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. And I thought you didn't have anything of your own. Daniel looked at her. That was the problem. Ethan stepped forward. This doesn't change anything. He left the military. Reed turned toward him. He didn't leave. Ethan froze. He was transferred into classified strategic operations. Daniel looked at Ethan. And you were never cleared to know. Ethan's face lost its color. The ceremony day arrived. The military stadium was packed. Hundreds of officers stood in formation. Families filled the grandstands. Victoria stood near the front. Ethan stood beside her. Neither spoke. Then the announcer's voice echoed across the stadium. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. The doors opened. Daniel entered. The entire stadium became silent. He walked slowly toward the reviewing platform. One step. Then another. General Reed raised his hand. Attention! Every soldier snapped into position. Then Reed shouted. Salute! Hundreds of hands rose simultaneously. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Every person was saluting Daniel. The man Ethan had called a nobody. The man Victoria had told to go home. The announcer began reading his citation. For extraordinary courage under impossible circumstances. Daniel stood perfectly still. For saving 47 lives? Victoria covered her mouth. For refusing personal recognition while protecting the integrity of his mission. Ethan stared at the ground. For sacrificing career advancement to support the service of his spouse. Victoria broke down. Daniel received the medal. The crowd erupted. But the greatest moment came afterward. General Reed turned to Victoria. "Colonel Hayes." Victoria stepped forward. "Yes, sir." Reed looked at Daniel. Then at her. "Salute the captain." Victoria froze. Daniel looked at her. For years, she had expected him to salute her. Now she stood before him. She slowly raised her hand. And saluted. Daniel returned the salute. Their eyes met. There was no anger in his face. Only sadness. Victoria whispered, "I'm sorry." Daniel lowered his hand. "It's too late for apologies. The ceremony should have been the end." It wasn't. That evening, General Reed summoned Ethan. The investigation had uncovered everything. Ethan had manipulated reports. He had taken credit for Daniel's strategic recommendations. He had intentionally excluded Daniel from meetings. And worse, he had repeatedly used Victoria's authority to advance his own career. Ethan denied everything. "I was following Colonel Hayes's orders." Victoria looked at him. "I never ordered that." Ethan stared at her. "You knew." "No." "You knew." The room went silent. Ethan's anger exploded. "You let him disappear." Victoria flinched. Ethan pointed toward Daniel. "You made him a nobody." Daniel remained silent. General Reed stood. "Major Cross, you're dismissed from command pending investigation." Ethan looked at Victoria one final time. "You'll regret choosing him." Victoria answered quietly. "I didn't choose him." She looked at Daniel. "I finally recognized him." Ethan was escorted away. Daniel walked toward the exit. Victoria followed. "Daniel." He stopped. "What?" "I want to explain." "You don't need to." "I do." Daniel turned. She looked exhausted. "I was proud of my rank." Daniel nodded. "I know. I thought being powerful meant being respected." "And now?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Now I know respect isn't something you wear on your shoulders." Daniel said nothing. She whispered, "I lost you before I realized you were the person I should have been proud of." Daniel looked at her for several seconds. Then he walked away. Victoria remained standing alone. 3 weeks passed. Daniel was offered a command position. General Reed wanted him to lead a new strategic division. Daniel accepted. Victoria heard the news from someone else. She didn't call him. She didn't want to interfere. Then one evening, Daniel returned home to collect his remaining belongings. Victoria was there. She stood in the living room. "I thought you were moving out." "I am." She nodded. "I packed everything." Daniel looked around. His old books. His photographs. His medals. Everything was ready. Victoria approached him. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Did you ever love me?" Daniel closed his eyes. "That question hurts." "Why?" "Because I loved you enough to disappear for you." Victoria started crying. "I didn't deserve that." "No." Daniel picked up his bag. Victoria stepped closer. "Can we start again?" Daniel looked at her. "Do you want your husband back?" "Yes." "Or do you want the man everyone salutes?" Victoria's eyes widened. "I want Daniel." He studied her face. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking at his rank. She wasn't looking at his medals. She was looking at him. "I don't know if I can trust you again," he said. "I understand. And trust doesn't return because someone says sorry." "I know." Daniel walked toward the door. Victoria didn't stop him. But before he left, she said, "I'll wait." Daniel paused. "You shouldn't." "Maybe." She smiled sadly. "But for once, I'll wait for something I actually value." Daniel left. 6 months later, Daniel stood at the entrance of the Strategic Defense Division. He was now Commander Hayes. His reputation had spread throughout the military. But Daniel remained the same. Quiet. Disciplined. Humble. One morning, he received an unexpected visitor. Victoria. She wore no medals. Only a simple officer uniform. Daniel looked at her. "Colonel." She smiled. "Commander." He gestured toward a chair. "What brings you here?" "I came to return something." She placed a small box on the desk. Daniel opened it. Inside was his old wedding ring. He looked at her. "You kept this?" "I kept everything." He closed the box. "Why return it now?" "Because I don't want to hold on to something I haven't earned." Daniel remained silent. Victoria continued. "I resigned from my command." Daniel looked surprised. "You did what?" "I requested reassignment." "Why?" "Because I finally understood that leadership isn't about standing above people." She smiled. "It's about standing with them." Daniel looked at her differently. "That's something I would have expected you to understand." "I should have." She stood. "I won't ask you to come back." Daniel's eyes softened. "Thank you." Victoria walked toward the door. Then Daniel said, "Victoria." She turned. He stood. "Wait." She stopped. Daniel walked toward her. "I can't promise the past will disappear. I don't want it to. I can't promise everything will be like before. I don't want that either." Daniel smiled faintly. "Then maybe we start with something new." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Friends?" Daniel nodded. "Friends." She smiled. And for the first time in years, neither of them saluted the other. They simply shook hands. 1 year later, Fort Raven hosted another ceremony. This time, Daniel wasn't receiving a medal. He was presenting one. A young soldier stood before him. Nervous. Proud. Terrified. Daniel pinned the medal onto his chest. "You earned this." The soldier saluted. Daniel returned it. The crowd applauded. Among them stood Victoria. She had been promoted again. But this time, something was different. She didn't stand beside Daniel. She stood among everyone else. Because she had finally learned something. Rank didn't make someone worthy. Titles didn't create respect. And medals didn't define courage. Character did. After the ceremony, Victoria approached Daniel. "You looked happy." "I was." She smiled. "I've been thinking." "That sounds dangerous." She laughed. "I deserve that." They walked across the empty parade ground. The sun was setting. Victoria looked at the rows of soldiers. "Do you ever regret what happened?" Daniel thought about it. "No." She looked surprised. "Not even us?" Daniel smiled. "If none of it happened, I might never have remembered who I was." Victoria nodded. "I suppose sometimes people have to lose something before they understand its value." Daniel looked at her. "And sometimes they have to stop chasing respect before they finally receive it." Victoria smiled. "Are you still angry with me?" "No." "Do you forgive me?" Daniel stopped walking. "Yes." Her eyes filled with tears. "But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting." "I know." Daniel looked toward the parade ground. Hundreds of soldiers were beginning to leave. One by one, they passed him. And every soldier saluted. Daniel returned every salute. Victoria watched him. Then she smiled. Because she finally understood. The salute wasn't for his uniform. It wasn't for his medals. It wasn't even for his rank. It was for the man beneath all of it. The man who had once walked away quietly when everyone called him a nobody. The man who The man who had saved 47 lives without asking for recognition. The man who had sacrificed his own career for someone he loved. And the man who had finally learned that he never needed anyone's permission to know his own worth. Victoria stepped beside him. Daniel? Yes? I'm proud of you. He looked at her. This time, he believed her. Thank you. They stood together as the last rays of sunlight fell across the parade ground. A young soldier passed them. He stopped, turned, and saluted Daniel. Daniel returned the salute. Victoria smiled. And for the first time, Daniel didn't feel like a nobody. He felt like himself. Captain Daniel Hayes. A soldier. A survivor. A husband who had loved too deeply. A man who had lost everything. And a hero who never needed to announce that he was one. Because sometimes the loudest proof of a man's worth isn't what he says. It's the moment an entire room rises to salute him. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't making someone regret underestimating you. It's becoming impossible to underestimate ever again.